Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. I'm Morgan and this is everything I made in 2023. So first things first, I am a crocheter. I've crocheted for a few years now. I think I started in 2020, but before that I had tried in like 2017. And back then I feel like I didn't know how to actually learn skills. I'd just be like, hope it all works out. But in 2020, I think I started making amigurumi, and that was a really great place to start. And I just expanded from there, making granny square blankets and other things, and fell in love with the hobby of crochet because it helped my mental health so much. I'd love to hear down below in the comments, what's your favorite thing you made this year? This year I crocheted, I learned to knit, I tried embroidery, and I can't wait to share those things with you, so let's dive right on in. The first thing I made this year was this little jacket for my son. It's a little hoodie, and I got the yarn from an independent yarn shop in Ligonier, Pennsylvania, which is a cute town my husband used to go to when he was a kid with his family. And I don't actually know what the yarn's brand was, but it is an acrylic yarn and it's very shiny. I'm not sure if it was actually ideal for a cardigan, but I think it worked up really cute, and it was, I think, my first crochet garment. No, that's not true. I made a garment for my Harry Styles concert back in 2021. I think it turned out pretty cute, and that led me right into my next crochet garment, which was trying to make the Folklore Cardigan inspired by Taylor Swift's, which if you see here, it turned out a lot different than what I'm about to describe, because I tried to crochet it at first. And I had never knit before, and I didn't think I was ever going to learn to knit, but I got like a quarter into the back panel and I realized that I wasn't loving the way the crochet stitch was looking on the Folklore cardigan. I was like, the original is knitwear, you can tell there's a huge difference. I don't think that crochet is optimal for a garment like that. I mean, I've seen so many people do it and do it well, but I was following an online tutorial of like how to crochet the Taylor Swift cardigan, and I just wasn't happy with it. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna learn to knit so that I can make the Folklore cardigan. So in order to learn how to knit, I cast on a little baby romper because I am a mother, and at that time I think I cast on the 12-month size because my son was 6 months old and he'd been fitting in size for a year. Now he's like 19 months fitting in 4T. He never stops growing. But because of that, by the time I was halfway through the first panel of the romper, he'd already outgrown the 12-month clothing, and I was like, you know, there's no point in me finishing this. So even though it was looking really good, and I'm so proud of myself for that being literally my first ever time knitting, I did scrap it. But again, I'm not going to be finishing that project. And I have to say, my time crocheting is 100% what made it possible for me to pick up knit so easily. Some people will hear that like you just started knitting and you're already making things like the Folklore cardigan and feel defeated because it takes time to pick up the skill and the craft, but that's very normal, and it took me a long time to hone the craft of crochet, and I think that's why I was able to understand the anatomy of a stitch when it came to learning knit. I was able to pick it up a lot easier than it took me to pick up crochet. It took me a while to get confident with crocheting. But throughout this year, I was going to be working on this cardigan. I knew it was a huge undertaking. It is consistent of the back panel, which is huge, 2 sleeves, 2 front panels, and the button band. I said to myself, I'd love to finish this by fall so that I can wear it, but I also know that this is a huge undertaking for one of my first knit projects, so I'll let it take some time, but I want to keep knitting. So I cast on a sweater for my son, the Monday sweater by Petite, but I definitely made some changes. Like I added a stripe. I was just doing whatever. I think I was like a little too confident with being a new knitter because I was already a crocheter. I made his sweater in Loops and Threads Cotton Cream in the color Deep Teal, and I think it's so perfect. Honestly, I made it in, because of the last knitting experience, I made it so big, and I also don't think I checked my gauge. Again, too confident. In crochet, I don't think gauge ever matters as much, especially when you're not making garments, plushies, or whatever it is, blankets. If things turned up a little too big, oh well. If they turned up a little too small, you add a few more rows. I wasn't experienced with having to check my gauge, so I just didn't. The sweater turned out so large around his midsection, but it's perfect because, as I said, my son is a growing boy and he has gotten so much wear out of that sweater. I finished it before his birthday, so in May. He's still wearing it. And as I said, he grows out of sizes like a weed, but we at first would roll up the sleeves and he would wear it really oversized, and now this winter he's wearing it and it's the perfect size. I think I made it in 2 to 3T, but then it also was, like I said, above gauge. So just like really big. I'm really glad I did because it's gotten so much wear, and I think that's one of the biggest fears when knitting garments, and especially for littles, that you don't want them to not get enough wear when you've put so much time and effort into a hand knit item. And the stripe I added, I wanted to add something to accent, and I wanted to practice changing colors. A lot of my experience knitting this year was just practicing new techniques and wanting to learn new skills so that I could get more comfortable as a knitter. But with the help of a lot of YouTube tutorials, I managed. The next thing I made was actually embroidery. I'd never really embroidered before. I had at one point made a little book quote on an embroidery hoop back in like 2018. It was a book quote from one of my favorite book series, the Shatter Me trilogy. Comment down below if you've read or love that series as well. I think I actually did this one without ever even watching YouTube. Maybe I did, but I don't remember. But this year I actually watched YouTube videos, taught myself a little bit of how to embroider because I was interested in it, and I made this hoop for a friend of mine. It was a birthday gift and I'm so proud of it, and I really want to make myself one too. It's one of my favorite Taylor Swift lyrics too, so I really need to make one for myself as well. And honestly, I really enjoyed embroidery. I want to do it more, but 9 times out of 10 if I sit down, I pick up one of my knit projects. So I just haven't picked up another embroidery project. I think part of it is having to find a sketch that I want to put on the fabric. I don't consider myself an artist. I consider myself a crafter. I know there's an overlap. I consider myself a creative. I think most creatives would fall into the realm of artists as well, but I definitely am intimidated by drawing, so I think that that's the only thing that stops me from embroidering that much. But I'm definitely eager to try embroidery more in the years to come. So as we know, I continued working on the Folklore Cardigan throughout the year, but I wanted something a little easier to work on that would be for myself. I cast on a lavender cardigan. I believe it was the balloon cardigan by Petite Knit, and I was working on it in this lavender shade of Big Twists panoramic yarn. I don't know why I used that yarn. It's a number 2 fine weight yarn. I don't know if I was just not gauging, not even considering gauge, but it was way too small. It was not going to work up to be the correct size. I think I was always very confused in the beginning about why knitters will hold yarns double with mohair. I still have yet to have worked with mohair. I'm mostly intimidated by the spin. So yeah, that cardigan was working up really small and I decided to frog it. But this year I would love to make a lavender cardigan for spring. Now that my Folklore cardigan is done and I've got that under my belt, I feel a lot more confident going in, and I know the importance of gauge now. This past summer I made my first socks. I actually made a video on my channel about making my first socks and how that went. I'm so proud of myself. Socks were something I was very intimidated by, especially after watching videos of how to make socks. So much that goes into like the heel and closing up the toe that I was like, I don't know if I can do that. And when I was crocheting, or exclusively crocheting, I tried making socks for my husband and they turned up being like a stocking. They were so big. Again, didn't care about gauge. So I felt like it was a really big undertaking, but a very important lesson in knitting to try making socks. I feel like everyone in the knitting community either makes socks or doesn't, and I wanted to be part of the sock club. So I cast on those socks, and the first one I cast on way too many stitches. It is bigger than the other and it falls off my foot, but I still wear them because I'm so proud of them. And they are lace work, and I was again so confident because I'd learned how to do cables. I could take on anything. But I knit them in a superwash merino yarn. I'd probably change that now, knowing a little bit more about fiber content. The socks are holding up well. It's just that one of them's too big. When I was making the second sock, I realized the first was too big, so I cast on less. So part of me thinks I should re-knit the first sock, but I don't know if I want. Overall, I'm really proud of them, and I did a really great job for my first sock, especially with them being lace work. I think that that added a whole other level of learning new techniques as well as a whole new garment type. I will link the video below that I watched to learn how to knit socks because it was So helpful. I've probably watched it 200 times. I could not have made socks without this video. So in October, we went on a road trip in a van that we rented, and we were driving from Virginia up through New England to visit Acadia National Park. It was one of the most magical experiences I've had in my life. While driving, I was able to finish the final panel of my Folklore cardigan. They were not yet seamed together. I was so excited to be that much closer to finally completing this cardigan. It felt like this was the best thing I could ever make. I mean, we all know those things sold out so quickly and everyone wanted them. They were reselling for $300 on eBay. So to have a handmade one that I made myself is just very special. To have been able to work on this project in the places I've worked on it, before I actually got the panels all seamed together, my Speak Now cardigan arrived just in time for me to go to the Eras movie. I was so excited because I was hoping I'd get this done, but my sister was in town and I wasn't gonna work on seaming it up. I was very happy that it came the night before our movie. But one of my only criticisms with this cardigan, besides the fact that I was learning, so there are many mistakes along the way, is that if I could go back, I would probably choose a different fiber content. I chose Mighty Stitches colorway oyster, and it has a fiber content of 20% superwash wool, 80% acrylic, I think. And if I could go back, I would have definitely chosen a higher fiber content of wool. I think that that would help with the stitch definition. I think it would just make it overall be higher quality, but I'm so proud of this and it's an amazing accomplishment for one of my first projects. Another thing I would change is I would have worked the ribbing in a tighter gauge in a smaller needle size. That wasn't part of the pattern that I followed by Lion Brand. Knowing what I know now from other projects I followed by Petite Knit, I know that it's helpful to cinch in the ribbing by going down a needle or two, and I would definitely do that different if I did it again, but I highly doubt I'll be knitting this again. Next, I cast on the Ingrid sweater Junior for my son in Loops and Threads merino yarn in the colorway Stormy. It's such a beautiful, like charcoaly blue color. I'm so proud of it. It's a really fun pattern to work up. For so many textures, it works up so fast. It keeps you wanting to do a couple more rows. Because it's for a toddler, there's not many stitches on the needles. It worked up very quickly. Honestly, now one of my favorite things I've made, because I feel like I didn't make as many mistakes on it as I did some of my first patterns like this one. And the next thing I worked on was I started a granny stripe blanket. I love granny squares, and the idea of having to seam them all together is always a little stressful for me. So I've wanted for a long time to make a granny stripe blanket that's just round and round and round, so you don't have to seam them all together at the end. And it worked up so fast in the beginning because the square is so small. I got out to about here and then it started taking like an hour to get all the way around. Now I work on it sometimes in the evenings when my son's in bed and I just want something mindless or meditative to work on, and I'll put on an audiobook. Let me know what you listen to while you knit. Do you listen to knitting podcasts? I love to do that. I've been listening to AKA Nora Knits a whole lot. She's so calming and she's so inspiring, but I'd love to hear what you listen to while you knit or crochet. And I have gotten pretty far in it, but I'm gonna just keep going until it covers our whole queen size bed probably. So that's probably a project that will be in the works for a while, but it's not like weighing on me because it's just an extra thing to work on when I need something that I don't want to pay attention to. I also crocheted some Christmas gifts for my niece and nephew. My nephew is not born yet. He's going to be born this month. I made my nephew a little dinosaur. It's actually a big dinosaur and he's so squishy. It's a lovey, and I loved the pattern I followed. I got it on Etsy and I will put the name of the pattern right here, as well as the creator. And I wanted to use up some yarn I have, some bulky weight yarn. So that worked up so fast and I was so proud of it. It was so cute. So I was very confident going into the thing I decided to make my niece. I gave my niece her unicorn for Christmas, and I'm gonna put a picture on the screen of it, and she absolutely loved it. I also got a knitting machine for Christmas from Santa Claus and making it a little baby sleep sack. I know how helpful those were for my son to feel nice and cozy. So I put his little initial on it. It was so cute and his mama loved it. So I can't wait to see him wrapped up in it. And lastly, what's staying on the needles that I'm currently working on going into 2024 is my Arctic Light sweater by Kutova Kika. I love her channel. I'm so excited that she's becoming a mama. She's having a little boy, I think, just like me. So it's very exciting, and I had to cast on a pattern by her, which is so funny because I have her knitting book of patterns, but I haven't worked on any of them yet. But when I saw the Arctic Light sweater, I was like, I have to make that. One thing about me is I love some cables. I love textured knits. I started this in early December. It is working up so fast. I'm just about to finish the yoke and I'm so excited. It's so beautiful. Again, something I have just learned from my project of the Ingrid sweater is using a yarn with a higher wool content definitely pays off, and I wish I had done that when I cast on this sweater. I hadn't thought about that, and I also want to use up some of the yarn that I've already invested in that's in my stash. So the yarn I'm currently using is 100% like a premium acrylic. It's so beautiful. I'm so proud of it so far, and I can't wait to keep working it up and get to wear it. But those are all the things I knit in 2023. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope this inspires you to make something cozy in 2024.